Many of the world's greatest combat aircraft have been born not as a result of some officially inspired specification, but because of the unshakable conviction of one man or group of individuals in a revolutionary idea. No better example of this could be cited than the de Havilland Mosquito, which diverged so far from the official views pertaining at the time of its conception that this magnificent aircraft was almost never born at all. With the prospects of a world war looming, the designers of de Havilland quickly realized that the metalworking industries were going to have their hands full. The materials and manpower of the furniture-making industries were not going to be needed. Rather than these resources going to waste, why not build a wooden aircraft? Furthermore, the concept was to build a bomber with fighter instincts and an aircraft that could carry a substantial bomb load. Its main defense against enemy fighters would be its ability to outrun them and outmaneuver them in combat, something that the Mosquito's rival in the Royal Air Force, the Bristol Blenheim, severely lacked. It was the de Havilland Company alone that could take full credit for this aircraft. For against all of the opposition at the time, they went ahead with their belief in the rightness of this formula, and produced, for the Royal Air Force, one of the most potent weapons of the Second World War. The essence of the Mosquito was that the combination of many proven elements, 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the smallest practical airframe, extreme aerodynamic cleanliness, and a high power-to-weight ratio. The result was a flying machine which surpassed any other operational aircraft available at the time, and its most amazing attribute was its incredible versatility, which, as the war progressed, resulted in the aircraft being known as all things to all men, a claim which took until the introduction of the Tornado decades later to rival. It was a constant thorn in the enemy's flesh. Whether it was disrupting gatherings addressed by Germany's war leaders deep in the heart of the German territory, or attacking Gestapo headquarters at rooftop height, or merely keeping Berliners in the air raid shelters, the Mosquitoes were front-page news. Aesthetically, how much dedicated effort and foresight went into this aircraft from the skillful design team.
Airplane fast, which could fly on one engine. All other twin-engine airplanes, you had to struggle to keep them in the air on one engine. You could actually climb on one engine in a Mosquito. That was in the early days. As they got heavier and heavier and bigger bomb loads, then the single-engine performance wasn't quite so great. But it was still a wonderful airplane, and it was by far the bomber that flew the highest of any bombers in Bomber Command.
The Mosquito was a high-wing cantilever monoplane. One-piece wing slightly swept back at a leading edge and sharply tapered tailing edge. The center portion of wing carries the engine's mountings and radiators. The wing's fuselage and tailplane were all of wood construction, with laminated spruce flanges and plywood webs. Pinned, glued, and screwed, and finally covered with fabric. The final version of the Mosquito ended up with a wingspan of 54 feet, a length of 44 feet 6 inches, and a height of 17 feet 5 inches. The wing area was 454 square feet.
We attacked all sorts of targets on the ground, tanks, lorries, trains, bridges, and some of the more important targets like the Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen. We had to attack those at 0 feet by placing the delayed action bombs in the front door. This was done so as that the political prisoners that were being kept on the top floor by the Gestapo to try to stop us from bombing the targets from above, we put the bombs in the front door so that no harm would come to these political prisoners, which the Gestapo held. This sort of raid was done on several buildings. As I say, the Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen, the Shell building at The Hague, and a similar type of raid was carried out not by my squadron but by Group Captain Pickard on the Amiens prison when they breached the walls surrounding the prison and also breached the prison walls to enable 200 to 300 French political prisoners to escape the day before they were due to be executed. This was not my wing and not my squadron, but it was another example of the type of low-level bombing which the Mosquitoes had to do.
The landing gear is fully retractable, and the unit's air brakes are both hydraulically operated. The aircraft was powered by two Rolls-Royce Merlin 12-cylinder feet. The accommodation in the fighter and fighter-bomber variants was side-by-side seating for two crew members with an armor-plated bulkhead in the nose and a fat bulletproof widescreen. Entrance to the cockpit was through a door on the starboard side. In the bomber and reconnaissance variants, there was also accommodations for a crew of two, with a perspex nose section and a V-shaped windscreen. Entrance to the cabin was through a hatch in the floor. The possibility of developing a fast, light bomber was first investigated by the de Havilland Company in the summer of 1938, by which time the company had been concentrating on the design and development of a civil aircraft for some 15 years. In May the previous year, the beautifully proportioned and perfectly streamlined Albatross had begun its flight trials. The success of this aircraft, with its ability to carry a heavy payload at moderately high speeds with very low fuel consumption, led to a study of its military potential as a bomber, and furthermore into a complete study and analysis of the potential use of light wooden aircraft, carrying heavy loads at fighter-like speeds. The nucleus of the idea developed into a wooden monoplane powered by two Merlin engines, capable of flying in speeds of excess of 400 miles an hour. With the outbreak of war in 1939, the design effort into this project was doubled, and the Air Ministry interest was starting to develop. After considerable deliberation, the design team's preference for a crew of two and an aircraft completely devoid of defensive armament was officially accepted, and the basic requirement for a minimum of a 1,000-pound bomb load and a range of 1,500 miles was agreed. The design team were given a completely free hand. However, on the sheer farsightedness of that design team, they produced plans from an aircraft from the outset, with provisions for guns or cameras, so that in any eventuality it could serve equally well as a bomber fighter or photo-reconnaissance aircraft. On the 1st of March 1940, an official order from the Air Ministry of 50 aircraft reached de Havilland. The number was relatively small because of the still only lukewarm interest in its potential, and the realization that alternative aircraft might well be developed, which would render the committing of one type to large-scale production from the outset might be a somewhat short-term policy. In fact, for several months after the placing of the first order, the future of the whole Mosquito program remained in jeopardy. In that period of the war, when the whole future of Britain hung in the balance, it was natural that all efforts were placed on producing aircraft with already proven qualities, and a machine which, in some places, was regarded as simply a pipe dream should remain at the bottom of the priority list. But de Havilland pressed on with the prototypes, only able to do so because of the DH-98. As it was designated, made so few demands on strategic materials which were desperately in demand by other manufacturers. Three out of the 50 aircraft ordered were designated for prototype trials, and against all odds, production went ahead on them, whilst all of the materials and parts of the remaining 47 were assembled. On October the 3rd, 1940, 4 bombs dropped from a Junkers 88 and hit the de Havilland plant at Hatfield and destroyed over 80% of the production materials. By good fortune, no damage was suffered by the prototypes. The name Mosquito was adopted for this new aircraft on November the 25th, 1940, less than 11 months after the first detailed design. The first prototype made its maiden flight at Hatfield, with Captain Geoffrey de Havilland Jr. at the controls. The aircraft performed magnificently. The subsequent trials soon proved the astonishing agility and capability of the Mosquito, and there were few doubts left as to its potential.
On the first, there were discussions about increasing the load by cropping the vanes of the standard 500-pound bomb. 4 of this size, instead of the 4 250-pounders, would be housed in the same bomb bay. And so the design load was doubled before ever the aircraft went into service. The designers had provided for 4 20mm cannons in place of the bomb, which, together with 4 machine guns, gave a concentrated and destructive firepower.
Interest by the Air Ministry, having seen the test flights, now favored the fighter version. The order was changed to only 20 of the bomber variants and 30 fighters. Construction of the fighter prototype proceeded at Salisbury Hall, just outside of London. This served as a dispersal for the Hatfield factory and an experimental shop. The Salisbury Hall is now the home of the Mosquito Museum. Meanwhile, the bomber prototype had already undergone extensive trials at Hatfield and had now been handed over to the RAF for official testing. Between the prototype and production stages, only one major modification was made, which was the extending of the nacelle fairings to improve the airflow. In July 1941, the Mosquito was known to be a winner, and de Havilland were told to prepare for large-scale production in their own factories and also make plans for production in Canada. The third prototype had been tested as a reconnaissance aircraft, also with great success, and the initial order for 50 Mosquitoes was now divided into 10 bombers, 10 reconnaissance, and 30 fighter variants. There was also a proposal for a dual-controlled trainer version to be prepared. The first Mosquitoes entered service with the RAF in July of 1941. The first operating sortie was made on September the 20th, 1941, 21 months after the start of design. But this sortie was never a bombing or fighter mission. A camera-equipped Mosquito set out unarmed, photographing enemy harbors from a height of 4.5 miles. With high photographic skills and determined flying, the Royal Air Force developed long-range reconnaissance at top fighter speed, something that the enemy was never able to achieve. All Europe thus became within range of the cameras, which brought back pictures of microscopic accuracy that defeated every ingenuity of camouflage. The perfect view of a Norwegian hideout 1,000 miles from England. A Messerschmitt factory. The bomber, in which the armaments were sacrificed for speed, faces the test of reality. Its operational career began when 4 Mosquitoes bombed Cologne, a few hours after the first 1,000 bomber raids at dawn, May the 30th, 1942. From that first day's work, pilots believed that the best way to use such speed and maneuverability was to fly it in a rooftop height, where neither ground guns nor radio communications could concentrate upon them. The technique was perfected.
Coast coming up. Something behind. Looks like a 190, about 1,000 yards away. Open up and go take out. What's happening now? Still there. Keep going. Okie dokie. They've given up. Miles away now. Gosh, we could have pinned his ears back if we'd had some guns.
Home sweet home. They bombed the target, the whole target, and nothing but the target. British radio experts called for a fast aircraft capable of carrying apparatus for bombing accuracy through clouds. The Mosquito was chosen to carry this equipment, for it could fly far, fast, and high. The Pathfinder had to reach its target maybe 600 miles from home and fly rock steady through all the flat before dropping his marker flare. From May 1943, Mosquitoes undertook nuisance bombing at night. Because of their speed, they lost only 11 aircraft in their first 1,000 sorties. By early 1944, they were carrying 4,000-pound blockbusters, and the big city was their favorite target. By now, this very small aircraft was carrying to Berlin a heavy bomber's load, unarmed and without the need of an escort. It represented a small capital epic, with small crew exposed to less danger because of its speed and exposed to danger for less time, yet it carried a 4,000 pounds load, and carried it more frequently than the slower, larger bombers. Night after night, Mosquito crews were briefed for their ops, seldom missing 3 or 4 nights per month in bad weather. High-altitude engines and pressure cabins enables them to bomb from a height of 6 miles. This was no longer nuisance bombing, but systematic pounding by Mosquito blockbusters in strength, led in by their own Pathfinders. Up to the spring of 1945, they had delivered 15,000 tons of bombs. Much of this fell on Berlin, visited for 36 nights in succession. The other half of the battle history concerns the armed Mosquito. After the first blitz had been broken by our bow fighters, Hurricanes and defense Mosquitoes took over the night defense of Britain. Radio location helped define the enemy in the sky, and Mosquitoes, now with the improved equipment, got busy in 1943 when the enemy sent its fastest single-engine fighters to England with a puny bomb load, copying the Mosquito technique. But they failed, because our Mosquito fighters could catch these hit-and-run raiders. When the V-1 attack started in June of 1944, it was the Mosquito's jobs to destroy those missiles by night. They were far from easy to catch, but Mosquitoes got 620 in the first 9 weeks. Later, when the launching technique changed, they destroyed their launching pads as well. By the end of 1944, Fighter Command Mosquitoes had destroyed no less than 660 enemy aircraft. Mosquitoes have been on ocean patrol since the winter of 1942, seeking out submarines and destroying the long-range enemy fighters sent to Harris bombers, which were after their submarines that were after our shipping. Accuracy was the best feature of the 6-pounder, firing at a rate of 25 shells in 20 seconds, devastating results against larger ships. Force and by Fighter and Bomber Command. Honor Command used Mosquito intruders to support their heavy assault in various ways, by escorting Lancaster and Halifax forces as fighter cover and by flying ahead of the main force over disorganized defenses. They lucked around airfields and shot down the enemy fighters on their own runways. From June 1943, Mosquito intruders worked as technical support for the Army. They took over the specialized methods of German attacks previously used by the enemy bombers. They didn't all get off scot-free. When a propeller had to be feathered to stop a damaged engine, it was sometimes necessary to jettison the wing tanks to regain a little of the lost speed. With the undercarriage damage, many a Mosquito landed on its belly, a cloud of dust and gas from automatic fire extinguishers. With the main entrance blocked, out came the crew by the fanlight. When the enemy was being driven across farms after D-Day, single-engine intruders kept them pinned under cover and Mosquito fighters smashed his movements by night. Aided by the lights of flares, they were out in their hundreds, night after night, and brought great havoc. Throughout the war, the Mosquito program underwent many new developments, and there were no fewer than 27 different variants produced. And apart from the more general rules, the aircraft rapidly became the subject of all sorts of experiments into fighters, bombers, and reconnaissance techniques. Throughout its service and war career, the Mosquitoes operating from the United Kingdom dropped just slightly less than 27,000 tons of bombs. They suffered fewer losses per 1,000 sorties than any other bomber command aircraft type. And an indication of their effectiveness was given in the attacks of the V-1 launching sites during 1944. One V-1 site was destroyed for every 40 tons of bombs dropped by Mosquitoes. Relative figures for the heavy bombers were approximately 1v1 sight for every 200 tons of bombs dropped. The Mosquito ended its career on the last raid by Bomber Command of the war in Europe on attack against Kiel by Mosquitoes of the 608th Squadron on May 2, 1945. As a bomber of all-wood construction, the Mosquito was unique. And its multi-role variants, it was outstanding and it possessed that highly desirable but all too rare ability to make a pilot feel part and parcel of his aircraft. It was loved by the crews because more than any other aircraft in Bomber Command, it was the one that would get them home. It captured popular imagination from the moment its first daring sorties over Europe became known, and its sensational exploits continued to sustain worldwide interest and enthusiasm to a greater degree than those of any other combat aircraft. The Mosquito could carry phenomenal loads over extremely long distances, performing feats out of all proportion to the specification originally envisioned by its designers. In short, the Mosquito was an outstanding warplane on every count. And if perhaps it was overshadowed by the Spitfire as the most popular aircraft from the war at the time, the Mosquito was certainly the most popular with the men that flew them.